Welcome back to the Carl Crusher channel. I have been using that Carl Vibe intro simply because it feels like a different category of video that I'm doing on this series where I'm going into what it was like being raised in a extremist doomsday cult version of Mormonism in Southeast Idaho, where I was taken as a child to do all kinds of interesting stuff, including necromancy rituals inside secret basement ordinances that they do in their temples. And I was taken to do this as a child, including um, a sealing. I was taken into the Salt Lake Temple and through all of those Masonic adapted rituals and everything into the church as a young man. And so, anyways, we're gonna talk about all of that today and get into more detail on all of that. So I wanted to recap really quick what we covered in the last episodes. So I talked about being born and blessed and having the name read into the church and how all of that went up into my baptism and what that was like going through the baptismal process and getting interviewed and so on. But I also had an entire video where I jumped ahead. I talked about leaving the church and going through my divorce and all of that. And then I went back and talked about my baptism and some of my experiences as a youth growing up. And this is where it gets really interesting, where I want to pick it up, because in the last video, I talked about what it was like to go after my baptism and get sealed in the temple to my family and how bizarre that was. And I even showed my temple clothes and what that was like, um, seeing my parents show up in the hallway at the temple. But one thing that I wanted to do was share kind of what that was like by showing you an actual video, a hidden camera video inside a Mormon temple wedding. I'm going to go ahead and move over to the side so he gets full credit here. You can go watch a lot of amazing stuff. He's a friend of mine on Facebook as well as on TikTok and everything. But this is New Name Noah. Now, I'm not going to play the audio because I don't want to get copyright stuff. This is all just for educational purposes and for insight. These types of things are considered um, sacred to the Mormon church, but to me, they were fascinating and troubling and created all sorts of baked in issues in my life. And so, what we're going to watch here is an actual temple wedding ceremony, a sealing, and you're going to see what I was talking about in the last episode, how when I was a young child, I was taken in to the Salt Lake Temple and saw all of my family and my siblings after they had just done an entire set of temple rituals. So my parents had just gone through their initiatory ceremonies, their endowment ceremony, and I'm going to talk about all that and what that's like. I'm going to walk you through the whole thing. That's probably going to come out in a later episode when I talk about that right before I go on my mission and I tell that part of the story. But before that, we went to the Salt Lake Temple, and my parents went through all the rituals and then wound up doing one like this, which is this is the temple ceiling. So you have all of the family gathered around, seated in chairs, facing towards this altar in the center of the room. And if you'll remember in the last episode, I talked about how they had these giant mirrors on the wall. These ones look actually really small here. Some of the ones that I've seen take up almost the entire wall. But you have everybody dressed in regular Sunday church clothes, but then the family and those that are going through the ceremony and the parents are dressed in that temple clothing. This is the Masonic clothes that I was telling you about and showed you, where my dad had on this kind of a hat. My mom was veiled. They have on the green Adam and Eve fig leaf aprons. The temple worker over here is all dressed in white. And you'll see here now the man escorts the wife over to one side of the altar and she kneels down, and then he goes and takes his place. Now I'm just going to back it up just a little bit so you can see now. He's wearing the apron now on the right shoulder, which means that they have just, and she is as well, they have just completed the endowment ceremony and gone through this whole ritual around an altar that looks like this, where they have completed these ordinances and rituals and ceremonies. And usually, this is the first day that the wife has even done any of this. The husband's probably done it all before he went on his mission, but now they are going through to get married. So he has to bring her through the veil. So there's a whole ritual that just occurred that they conducted where the husband goes up to this imaginary veil, this a big silk sheet hanging up that has Masonic symbols, a square and a compass and a slit in it. And they go up and they do these all the secret handshakes and passwords through the veil like they're talking to God. And then the husband goes through the veil, turns around, and then he behaves as if he is God, and he puts his hands through the cuts in the veil. This all sounds really bizarre, but we're going to get into it in a later episode. And he has to bring his wife through. Okay. So all of this is done in this patriarchal manner where the husband or the father or whatever is the head of the household. The wife just got done um, committing to these promises and covenants throughout the endowment, where she says that she's going to basically obey what her husband says. While he is obedient to God, she's going to be obedient to him. And then they go in there. And so, of course, he has to walk her over and take her to her spot on the altar and then walk around. So everything is done, the men first, and the husband is in charge, and this whole thing is set up to have that culture embedded into the community. So now they kneel down at the altar and they basically do this secret handshake, which is um, they look at each other and they take each other in this handshake. Let's see if I even remember this right. Do they do all of the signs and tokens? So usually there's like a whole talk that's given. We'll skip ahead through some of this. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so there's witnesses standing up. So this is usually the in-laws, the father-in-law. So now that you're married for time and all eternity. So now when you do this, when I did this in the Salt Lake Temple, this is just a regular wedding ceremony. Now imagine me being like 9 or 10 years old and I'm kneeling at this altar and all my brothers are, and we're all in a circle around the altar going through this together. And then the wedding takes place, but you do these secret handshakes where you interlock your hands and all that stuff around the altar, and everybody puts their hands on top of that, the secret handshake and stuff. And then the the marriage happens, and the sealing happens where the family is all put together. So it's totally different than a regular civil wedding and civil marriage. And I was taken in to do that. I just wanted to kind of illustrate what that was like, because in the last video all I did was tell the story. Now, going into what I wanted to talk about in this video today, I almost got up last night. It was on my mind. I was thinking through this whole part of my life and my story, and I was going to make this video last night and I couldn't. I it was too it bothered me too much. I started looking back on it, and this is the thing about when you leave a cult, when you escape or survive or get out of something like a version of Mormonism that I was in, you have this hindsight where you look back on your life and these things that you grew up with that were just baked into you and accepted as like a normal thing, like this is just what everybody's doing, everyone in the community, your parents, your family, the entire culture, for everyone that you know all around you, all the way into school and everything, this is just what you know. And but when you get out of it and then you look back on it, you have this sense of embarrassment and this sense of horror that kind of comes over you, where you're like, what was all this? And when you look back on it and you start to study real history and you start to research out where the rituals that you were doing came from and where they originated from and how it all came up into your life, And then it starts to occur to you how much of your life was taken up by this, and how I look back now and I'm like, wow, all except for maybe the last 8 years, 8 to 10 years of my life, I was completely devoted and dedicated to this whole system that was made up, this whole fictional, ritualistic occult system that I had no idea where it originated from. And at worst, if it's real, looking back on it now, I have a totally different perspective about the secret occult Masonic nature of all of it. Now, I'm going to go into all the detail here about when I was taken to the temple as a young child to do baptisms for the dead and what that was like. The rituals that were going on and that I was taken to go do over and over and over again as a young child before I even knew what was going on. So, the Mormon church has this mindset that 8 years old is the age of accountability. Now, nowhere else in modern society is that considered acceptable. That's not an age of consent or an age of accountability by any kind of means. Most 8-year-olds are not able to make any kind of decisions for themselves. They haven't read through the Bible, they don't understand anything that they're participating in. So by the time you're like going up into your youth from 10 to 13 years old, right before becoming a teenager, to be taken up to do these rituals and what they call these ordinances. When I look back on them now, the the darkness that surrounds that for me and how difficult it is for me to look back on is a totally different perspective, because in the moment as a child, I was going on, it was just like an awesome field trip I'm going on with my friends. I didn't recognize the indoctrination. I didn't understand the occult, necromancy, ritualistic nature of it, and how literally the rituals are done in this rapid repetition that, and there isn't any real substance to them other than this sort of strange belief system. So let me talk about the belief system really quick. In Mormonism, the belief is that when Jesus comes again, he's going to come back any day for the second coming of Christ. And he's going to appear in the sky. He's going to come down from the east, which is why all the Mormon temples have statues on the top facing east, except for a couple that face west or whatever. For some reason, they don't know. But when Jesus comes back, the idea is that during the 1,000 years that he's going to be here on earth in Jackson County, Missouri, reigning over Zion, they're going to establish this basic, like this socialist society, where everybody is ruled over by the Mormon church, and they're going to run all the political systems and the whole global religion, and Jesus is going to be at the top of it, right? And the important thing that's going to be going on during that entire 1,000 years is work for the dead. That is at the core fundamental belief. And what they mean by work for the dead, salvation for the dead, is that they believe that everybody who has ever been born on the planet, who never got the opportunity to become a member of the Mormon Church, of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that means that they have not been baptized and they have not gone through the proper temple ordinances and the saving ordinances and not been married in the temple with the proper authority that was chosen by God, or they call it ordained by God, in order for it to be valid. So if you got baptized in another church, if you got married outside of Mormonism, it doesn't matter how faithful you were, it doesn't count, because you didn't do it within the authority pyramid and the structure of the authority chain of the church. And so they draw that authority upon lineage and that a line of authority going back to the leaders of the church. And they thoroughly believe that when you die, you have to have these ordinances. And as a man, you have to have the priesthood, and you have to get married, and you have to get married ultimately to multiple wives in a version of polygamy to get into the highest level of heaven. So the celestial kingdom, the highest degree of glory. That's what they call it. So the idea is that during the millennium, this 1,000 years of Christ on earth, the belief is that everybody who died without having that opportunity to get baptized and go to the temple and get married as a Mormon, now Mormons are going to do that for you. We're going to do that as a proxy or a stand in, like an avatar for you as a ghost. So let's say your great great grandpa died and he was in the Civil War or something like that, and he never got the opportunity to get baptized and hear the teachings of Brigham Young or something like that. So he didn't join the Mormon church. So now somebody does their family history work and they uncover your great great grandpa's name and their information. They find out all that genealogical work and they put it into this family tree church genealogical system that's kind of like ancestry.com, which they sold all of that to Ancestry and partnered with them, and then all of your information ultimately got sold to BlackRock, by the way. A lot of you didn't know that, including your DNA swabs. So all of you guys that did the DNA swabs to see what your ancestry came from, and you did that through the Mormon church and through the website Ancestry, all of your DNA is owned by that giant mega conglomerate BlackRock, uh, that huge investment corporation that has artificial intelligence that's basically running our country and the globe right now. So the whole thing is really interesting when you dig into all of that side of it. But nonetheless, when you have your family history work done on your great great grandpa, someone like me, even as a child, would have to go in to a Mormon temple, to those big temples that they build in every city now. And you go in there and you have to get baptized for those dead people, for your great 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 grandpa or whatever. And I would take his name and information on a card and go in and do it for him and pretend like I am him. And they call that proxy work, but it's just like Avatar. So, like, I would go in and I am literally taught and supposed to visualize and believe that when I'm there and I'm going through the temple for dead people, that those dead people are there in the temple. In fact, the temple is an oracle. It is an axis mundi, or a center place, an axis, a world axis, where it's a connection point that is separate between the worlds. They believed, and even professors at BYU and scholars and call it Hugh Nibley and stuff, they taught that the temple was this, like an Egyptian pyramid. It was a place in between dimensions of reality, between our world and the spirit world. And so all of these dead people, their ghosts, their spirits who are supposed to be deceased in the spirit world, that spirit world is believed to be right here on earth with us in this physical dimension. So there's this ghost realm, or like a astral plane, a spirit realm overlaid on top of our reality, that is like an augmented reality or another dimension of reality that we don't see. And it is spirit prison. They literally call that. There's spirit prison and spirit paradise. And spirit prison is where you go when you die if you aren't a member of the church. If you're not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as a Mormon and you die and you haven't been baptized and gone through the temple and done all that, you go to spirit prison. Okay? And they believe that in order for you to get out, someone who is a member of the Mormon church has to go to the temple in the physical realm as an avatar for you, as a stand-in, and your spirit or ghost goes along with you. And in that place, you go together and exist together. And you are told and taught and expected that when you go to the temple to do this, that you should expect to have spiritual contact with these spirits. You are told that you're going to have communication, to pay attention to your feelings, to pay attention to the feelings of the Spirit and the Holy Ghost. And you hear all these stories and you're taught all these stories. And they tell them in the waiting room about how when people went there to do this work for dead relatives, how they knew that their dead relatives was right there with them, standing right beside them, and they could feel it, and or that they saw them on the staircase or coming up and down the hallway, or they went and had a vision or a dream about it. And there's all these stories. So you're primed up and groomed up to basically anticipate that you're going to see dead spirits and ghosts in the temple, or you're going to have contact with the dead, especially specifically the people that you're going to do that work for them. So, what would happen as a young child is I would get taken to the church by my parents and basically dropped off, and I'm in my church clothes, like I'm going to go to a regular church meeting. And then we would all gather together, sing songs, say a prayer, get in the bus or the vans, and we would all drive up to the Idaho Falls, Idaho Temple. I was in Southeast Idaho in a town called Rexburg and Sugar City. And so we would get together in a group of friends and we would all go up with the local church leaders. And so it would be our young men's leader, our group leaders, the bishopric, and other men from the ward that would go with us. And we drive up and we go to Idaho Falls, to the Idaho Falls Temple. And this is at night. And so we go up there at night. It's after hours, so it's like dark outside. And then we go in and we go into the basement down into this waiting room. Okay. And it's so weird. So at the time, it's just like this whole field trip, right? And we go down in this waiting room and we sit in there and we first of all are taken in to locker rooms where we're supposed to change our clothes. So we go into this little locker and take all of our church clothes off. And then I put this white jumpsuit on. That's just like a onesie that zips up the front, just like pajamas. And it's all white, head to toe. And you now are supposed to be like you are a spirit. So now I'm like a ghost and I'm like supposed to be like I'm a spirit without a body, although I'm also Carl and I'm doing this as myself. So the proxy work has already begun at this point. So when you take your clothes off and put the white jumpsuit on, symbolically in the occult ritual of the necromancy work that you're about to do for the dead, you are now merging like an avatar with that dead spirit. So you are doing things for and in behalf of this dead person. And in this case, when we go as a youth group for multiple people. So the idea is that just me alone, I'm going to be baptized for maybe 30 to 50 different people. And each one of my friends is all doing the same thing that night. Right. Now, the whole process of this is pretty wild because we would go and get changed into the white jumpsuit. The metaphors are all told to us about how now this is like you're doing this in behalf of the dead. You're going to be baptized for dead spirits. We're paying attention to our feelings and all that. But really, what happens is we're taken into this little waiting room where we sit there and they play this movie for us. And I think I'm actually going to pull it up for you now. I wasn't sure if I was going to do this. So, um, we'll just go ahead and pull up this window. Now, this is actually a TikTok that I filmed. So, when I was taken to the Mormon Temple to do baptisms for the dead, this movie, Johnny Lingo, is a BYU, Brigham Young University, LDS Church produced movie that has all to do with this whole idea of a dowry, this old fashioned indigenous version of buying your wife with cows. So having a certain number of cows to buy your wife. And we watched this movie in the basement of the temple for some reason for probably 30 times in a row before going in and doing all these baptismal rituals that I'm going to go into. So let's keep going and I'll show you. This is the movie that I was shown probably 30 times that night in the temple for some reason. Entire movie, Johnny Lingo, I was shown when I was taken as a child into the temple to do necromancy rituals in the basement. We watched this movie probably 30 times in a row, and it's totally about human trafficking. Watch this.
Well, it's time. the village flutter like birds when he passes. But, Mr. Harris, Mocha's daughter, Mahana? Mahana? You mean the little shadow who comes in once in a while for a spool of thread?
That's the one. She has a face like a stone and she looks as though she missed too many meals. She's not young either. She's maybe 19 or even 20.
What did he just say? She's not young either, only 19 or 20? Why did they leave that in the editing? Why would they say that? Look at this guy. He's like right off the plantation.
Mocha long ago gave up hope of finding a husband for her.
Why would Johnny Lingo take himself such a wife when he could have any girl on the island?
He's a shrewd trader.
None shrewder.
And they whisper it is because he can get her for nothing.
I can't believe he'd take a wife like Mahana just to save himself a few cows.
I only know what they're saying.
Well, it's none of our business anyway who Johnny Lingo marries.
Have you caught on what's going on yet? They're talking about how many cows it's going to cost Johnny Lingo to buy his wife. And she's ugly. They're all talking about how she's this ugly chick, Mohana. Look at this. Here's Johnny Lingo.
Not like this. I want a nice one with a handle. Gold. Carved with birds and flowers.
Sorry, this is all I've got. Do you have any idea what a mirror like that would cost? Why, the shipping alone is costly, you know, and it's preposterous. Gold he wants. Of course, I might be able to order one from the States.
So, they know all about the 8 cows.
They know.
Then, always and forever, when they speak of marriage settlements, it will be remembered that Johnny Lingo paid 8 cows for Mahana.
I expect.
This is so crazy. 8 cows. Here's Moana. Oh my gosh.
Waiting up there for? Today is a day of bargaining. Come down and be ready to greet your husband to be.
Look at her. She's hiding up in a tree. She's been so abused. Her dad just said, Moana, you ugly, climb down from that tree or I'm going to beat you. And like, because he's got to marry her off. Look at this. He's selling her for cows.
I will not have this. Shall I follow you up there with a stick? Do you want me to put bruises all over you so that Johnny Lingo will see what a disobedient daughter you are?
So he's going to beat her with a stick if she doesn't come down from the tree and marry this guy that she's never met because he's going to pay a bunch of cows for her. If this isn't human trafficking, I don't know what is.
Mahana, you are a very fortunate girl. All the other girls in the village envy you.
So he comes in to gaslight her and he's like, oh no, this is all nice. This is a good thing. So now they've gaslit her. She's got like Stockholm syndrome. So now she's in on it. She's like, oh, this is a good deal. Here comes Johnny Lingo with the 10 cows, or the 8 cows. Look how happy he is. Whoa. Wait for the ending. It's so good. Oh my gosh. So yeah, so they're all excited now. Look, she's coming out. She's like, 8 cows? No way. Nobody's ever spent 8 cows on a woman before. This is crazy. And look at him. So it's like money, the gold mirror. Look how much status and wealth I have. He walks up. He's never really met this chick before in his life until he paddles up on the island. Dad's like, 8 cows. You got her. Remember, the whole village was just saying she had the face like stone and that she was the ugliest girl in the village and saying, climb down from that tree or I'm going to beat you with a stick. And now, oh, it's all good. 8 cows. Fast forward now. Look what money can get you. Oh man, she's beautiful now because he's been treating her so good. Look at this guy. He can't get any more Kentucky Fried. He bought her the golden mirror,
Now she's all like changed. Oh, look, she's an 8-cow wife. And he's just like, oh my gosh, look at this. Like, who is this guy right off the plantation or whatever? Why the token white dude?
Hannah?
Welcome to our home.
Wait, watch this.
Aye.
She's got it so good, right? But wait.
Mahana.
Mahana must go for some water. Will you?
What? Mahana's still gotta go fetch the water. Get back in the kitchen, bitch. What? Did you hear that? Mahana's gotta go fetch water.
Mahana must go for some water. Will you?
It's so crazy, you guys. It's been right in our faces the whole time. Now look at him. He's back here on the island. He's like, man, this reminds me of the old cotton picking days, right? And here goes Johnny Lingo and Mohana. They're getting on the boat. They're getting off the island. It's like sailing off into the sunset. What a happy story or whatever. But if we
If you're
can't
interested
look back
in
on
a
our
concise
childhood,
yet hard to
watch
listen
this.
to rundown of the early trafficking of females by Joseph Smith in Nauvoo, head on over to Mormon Stories Podcast on YouTube and find this.
So this is the video that I was shown. This Johnny Lingo video was shown to me like 30 times in the basement of the temple, this entire construct. And I'm sure on other trips and other things to go do baptisms for the dead, that isn't the experience that other kids have. A lot of times you probably just sang songs or sat there and watched other church videos or whatever. Maybe our leaders were just being goofy and just letting us watch whatever we wanted. I do remember the kids all being like, Johnny Lingo, we want to watch Johnny Lingo, because the other church videos were crazy. They were all embedded with all these church talks and weird stuff, and these skits about like old people being left alone and lonely to die, and no one's writing them letters, like to make you feel all guilty and crazy stuff. But this was all presented before going in. But there was also talks given, and one of the talks that really stuck with me gave me this sense of like inner guilt complex. And I'll tell you what was told. It was this story, and I'm really curious if anybody else heard the same one. But it was like one of the temple leaders got up and was doing like an orientation about the ordinance and what we were going to do. And he starts talking about baptisms for the dead and things. But most of all, he's explaining to us, it might have even been the temple president at the time. And he came in and was like, saying, we do worthiness things here, worthiness interviews, and you have to be clean and worthy to come and do these things in the temple. And if you're doing anything wrong in your life and you're lying about it, if you're hiding secrets, if you've done anything, committed any sins, and you've been pretending and lying about whether you're worthy or not in order to come here because you're pretending, that the Holy Ghost will know and that God's going to know. And he tells this story about how like a group of people came to go to the temple, and they were all sitting there ready to go in. And at the last minute before they were ready to go in and do the rituals, one of the individuals had this impression like from God that just basically told them, you are not worthy to go in and you can't do this. You're living a double life or whatever. And the temple president got the same impression. And so he stood up in front of the room and he said to everybody in that group, there's someone in this room that knows that they're unworthy to be here today and that they've been lying to themselves and to the people around them. And you know that you've done things that you haven't repented for. And so you shouldn't be here right now. And you know this. And then the individual got up in his own shame and embarrassment because he realized that it was him, and he knew, and the spirit was telling him that it was him. And somehow the spirit and the gift of discernment with this temple president allowed him to see that this was true. So the guy got up and left, or the kid got up and left and went and waited out in the car, right? So then he turns and he's talking to all of us, telling us the story. And he says, so Look into yourself now and into your soul and ask yourself, is that you tonight? Is one of you in here unworthy to be here? And have you been lying to yourself about the things that you've done? And in that moment, my mind goes racing back like a near death experience, like my life flashing before my eyes. And I am literally thinking of every single thing I've ever done wrong, according to the construct of Mormonism that I've been taught, which is this extreme version of right and wrong, where you can't even think thoughts in your own mind, and there's sins of omission and all this stuff to where, like, even if you're not doing your best, putting in your 100%, that's still a sin. Even if you did try, you didn't give it your all and you know it, you're still sinning. I mean, it's so intense, you know? And so I'm sitting there and I'm racing through my mind thinking, is that me? Is he talking about me? I'm not a very good person. And I have this flashback to this conversation. So we're going to jump back for just a second to this conversation where my church bishop at the time got up in front of this whole youth group at church. And we're all sitting in there with all the boys and all the girls together, which is very rare when you have a combined activity where the boys and the girls are together. So I'm sitting in there by these girls that I think are cute and that I like, and sitting behind them, and I'm there like hee hee with my friends, just this innocent little kid. And the bishop comes in the room in this meeting, and I remember distinctly when he goes up to the front of the room, his neck turning all red, and he starts to sweat, and his cheeks turn all red. And I'm like, what is going on? And he proceeded to give this entire lecture to all these little children, and they shut the door. The church leaders are in there, and the bishop's in there, and it's like the primary presidency and teachers, they shut the doors. And so we're all these little kids in there. And then the bishop basically describes to us what sins are. He described to us all the technical terms and names for touching yourself. He taught us all what pornography was. He told us that if you participated in any of that kind of stuff, that it was going to make you gay, and that it was right up there next to a sin with being gay. He taught that in the class. He was using terminology and explaining things about adult situations that I had no concept for. I didn't know what the words he was using. I had no understanding. He was teaching us all this stuff. And it was like he had been assigned or been told, like, okay, you have to go in and basically teach everybody what this is, teach all the children what to feel guilty about. So all of a sudden, all these things that I had no idea what they even were in the world. I was in a Truman Show. You got to remember, this is before the internet, right? Grew up totally innocent, and I'm probably like 11 years old at the time. And he's sitting there and he explains to everybody what all of these very adult R-rated things are and what they're called, and that they're wrong, and that they're going to make you gay, and that if you do any of those things, you have to come into his office and tell him about it. You got to come in there alone, schedule an appointment with him and talk to him and tell him what you did. And this other situation flashes into my mind in that moment. Remember, I'm still sitting there in the temple getting ready, and the temple president is like, who in here is unworthy to be here? So my mind is racing back through this, and I look over across the room, and one of the the youth group leaders that's there, one of my best friend's dads is sitting there, and he's all dressed in white, and he's getting ready to go in and do the same stuff with us as a part of the church, right? And I have this all of a sudden this realization like, hang on, just like a few weeks ago, I was over at his house down in the basement with my buddy, and that guy came down in the basement where we were watching cartoons and playing with GI Joes and He-Man action figures and stuff. And he came down in the room with a box of cassette tapes and said, "Oh, you guys think this show's good? Where do you get a load of this?" And he played pornographic videos for me and my friend, and he stayed there in the room and showed us these porno films, these adult films to underage kids. And this is all running through my head. So I'm checking myself, but he's sitting over there and he's worthy to be here. He's he's all dressed in white and he's sitting there nodding his head smiling up front looking around the room. But I have this memory of him just like a little while ago and doing this. And then I look across the other couple of leaders from my church and my bishop, and I have this memory of a scout camp trip to a lake called Pack Saddle Lake. And I look over at one specific church leader, and it's like this flash goes through my mind. And I have this memory. We're up at this scout camp out for Boy Scouts. Now, there's a whole movie coming out, a Netflix series called Scouts Honor, that is about a huge scandal about the Boy Scouts of America. And during this exact same time that I'm telling these stories, there was like over 83,000 cases against the Boy Scouts for children being compromised in adult situations. And the Mormon church at the time was pushing Boy Scouts so heavily that the church leaders were proclaiming it from the pulpit that it was actual doctrine. So, really quick, I'm going to share with you guys what this is like. This is one of the church talks about 100 years of scouting and the relationship between the Mormon church and scouting. So, this is again just for entertainment and educational purposes from my own personal experience and adding relevance to, as and reference and context as to why I was up at this lake and why Boy Scouts of America was so important, why everybody should go watch this Scouts Honor movie and series that comes out. And then I'll tell you the experience of what happened to me up at Pack Saddle Lake and the whole thing and some other stuff. And then we'll go back to how I'm looking around the room at the temple and all these leaders involved in all of this from my local church and some of the parents of some of my friends, their fathers were a part of this, sadly. So this is I'm going to skip a little bit ahead and we're going to listen to part of this.
Than others. Some overcome handicaps through sheer effort and determination. Scouting brings out the best in each of us. You've learned much from scouting. Live what you've learned and will continue to learn. Help others to hike the trails, to keep steadfast in the paths of truth, of honor, of duty, that all of you can soar together on eagle's wings. You are part of a mighty army of youth, even a royal army, and every organization to be successful has an honored tradition to uphold. May you uphold scouting's tradition, for it can be as a lighthouse beacon in the world of stormy seas. It can be a motivation
So one of the things that he said there that's really key, I think that everybody needs to note, is when he said that we are like an army of God. One of those teachings that was being instilled into me heavily as a youth, and the Boy Scouts of America was a model for that for this church leader, Thomas S. Monson. He would proclaim that Boy Scouts of America was a function of the Mormon church, that it was part of the church, and that it was necessary for young men to go as almost a part of their worthiness. It was packaged to you that way. Like he knew that it was from God and that it was an essential part of it. And we were being taught as children by this man and Gordon B. Hinckley before him that we were this special chosen generation, this army of God that had this special priesthood authority, that we were going to be coming up into the church to be prepared for Jesus to return, and that we were going to fight with the priesthood of God and basically save the world at the last days doing this work. So when he's saying these little coded messages and saying stuff like, you are like doing Boy Scouts as part of you being in the army of God, this is like instilling this cult mindset into the kids and all of my friends to go do scouts honor, to be obedient, to be subjective to the leadership, and to basically fall into line with these uniform protocol, and to be obedient, to strip ourselves of our individual identity in order to chase after badges and awards. And anything that we need to do goes through the leadership and our local church leaders. So we're going to talk about that. Anytime anything goes wrong or you have a problem, you're supposed to go talk to your church bishop. But what happens if the leadership that the bishop picked is the problem, or the bishop himself is the problem? Then it becomes this cycle where from everybody to the therapist, to the parents, to the local church leaders, to the scout leaders are part of a cycle of funneling abuse into the shadows and under the rug in order to hide it. Meanwhile, the public face of the church is promoting Boy Scouts and these organizations that have, going on 90,000 abuse cases allegedly, and court cases going on and unfolding and all of that. Meanwhile, they're pushing it like it's an important part of the church. Fast forward to now, the Mormon church doesn't even affiliate with Boy Scouts. It's just some optional thing. Meanwhile, when I was being raised, this guy, Thomas S. Monson, was giving talks like Boy Scouts of America was a big function of the church. It was an official part of the church, and that you had to go. And it was important for us to get ready for the last days.
To prepare for your role in life, it can be a yardstick against which you measure your accomplishments. Every boy blessed by scouting adopts the motto, be prepared. He subscribes to the code, do a good turn daily. Scouting provides proficiency badges to encourage skills and personal endeavor. Scouting teaches boys how to live, not merely how to make a living.
Listen to this.
It has been said, the greatest gift a man can give a boy is his willingness to share a part of his life with him.
Ooh, okay. So this is the context in which I'm up at this scout camp out at this place, Paxata Lake, is this idea that I'm supposed to be up there. So I'm looking around, and my scout leaders and church leaders are all of the ones who are sitting there in this temple basement, getting ready to go in and participate in these occult rituals with us as the officiators conducting the rituals. I look over and I see this guy who just exposed me as an underage child and his own son intentionally to adult films in his basement. And he's sitting up there dressed in white as one of the youth organization leaders. I look across the room, this bishop who just gave this whole talk has had multiple one-on-one interviews with me and all of my friends about those things that he taught us about that were wrong and going to make us gay and all this stuff, and baking these ideas into our minds and sense of self as young children. I haven't even got to the necromancy rituals yet. Then I look across the room and the scout leaders are all there. And I have this memory of being up at the scout camp at Pack Saddle Lake. And there's this big rope swing, and we're all going off this rope swing and jumping out into the water. And of course, we're up there at the lake, and half of us all forget our swimming suits. And so we go over there, and I distinctly remember standing there by the edge of the trees. And one of the kids, I'm not even going to say who he is, goes up and he asks his dad and his father. And three of the other church leaders and the bishop are all standing there together, side by side, watching us at the lake. And his dad just says, just go skinny dipping. And I remember all the men looking up and over at him, and nobody said a word. And he turns around and says, okay, and he comes running back. And as he's running back, he takes his shirt off and goes up and he goes, skinny dipping. And he goes up and goes off the rope swing totally naked. So now all of us are just wearing our tennis shoes with nothing else. And we're all going off this big rope swing, swinging into the lake. And I distinctly remember as I'm swimming up, coming out of the water, and I look up, just having a good time as a kid, and seeing the bishop and the young men's leaders and this guy and this one guy who ended up being one of the heads of the high school, vice principal and maybe even principal, was standing there as one of the scout leaders. And I'll just say, he is juggling his car keys in his pocket aggressively. And they're all standing there staring at me, swimming up to the bank. And I look over and my other friend starts to go off the rope swing. And they're all just standing there like, watching us boys all skinny dipping in the lake. Now, all of this flashes back into my mind. And I'm sitting there in the temple all dressed in white. And the temple president just gets done saying, who among you? So messed up, dude. Who among you in this room, is anybody among you like not worthy to be here? Shouldn't be here because you've got unresolved sins that you haven't confessed to your bishop here. You've got these things. And I'm thinking of this story of what happened with this. My friend's dad showing me the tapes in the basement, and all of him, everything he said, all the vile, disgusting stuff that he said. I remember this camping trip up at the lake, and there's half of those guys sitting up front. I'm thinking of that talk that the bishop gave and the numbers of interviews and conversations that were totally awkward in his office. And then the temple president says this to me, and I was horrified. I had this paradox like, should I get out of here? Should I even be here? Am I worthy to go in here? Is he talking about me? And the fact that I'm even questioning all this stuff and these memories are coming up, is this me? Am I unworthy? But then how come all those guys are the leaders? How come they're the ones sitting up front? The bishop's up there. He was there. He was there. He was there. He was juggling his keys in his pocket. That guy showed me videotapes 2 weeks ago. Like, what is going on? And so I'm sitting there, everybody's keeping their mouth shut. And I'm thinking of my friends. Some of my friends are total numbskulls. And I'm like, they're worthy. I got to be worthy. So I keep my mouth shut, you know? And then also there's these talks like this. We'll skip ahead a little bit. Now, this is Richard G. Scott, and he basically says that victims of abuse need to be accountable for their part in being a victim.
All in his or her power to stop the abuse. Most often, the victim is innocent because of being disabled by fear or the power or authority of the offender. At some point in time, however, the Lord may prompt a victim to recognize a degree of responsibility for abuse. Your priesthood leader will help you assess your responsibility so that if needed, it can be addressed. Otherwise, the seeds of guilt will remain and sprout into bitter fruit. Yet no matter what degree of responsibility, from absolutely none to increasing consent, the healing power of the atonement of Jesus Christ can provide a complete cure. Forgiveness can be obtained for all involved in abuse.
So there you have one of the individuals who is considered by the church as one of the living 12 apostles, saying that victims need to look into their part that they played and how they're accountable for the abuse. What did they do? Did you invite it to yourself? What were you doing to cause it to be attracted to you? How did you dress? And it's victim shaming, victim blaming. And so I'm sitting there going through all of this, swirling through my head in this guilt complex. And I had no idea that I'm getting ready to go through and do this avatar proxy work for the dead, this necromancy. And what happens is you're taken in to this whole room. I'm pulling it up right now. And we do these baptisms for the dead. Now, in my temple, what was shown to me was in the Idaho Falls temple, and we had these oxen. So you walk into the baptismal font, and they would take us in a few at a time, and we would sit around the room on these. There behind here, there's these other chairs. So you see in the back, there's these benches along the wall. And then up here, above the font, is like this little table with wheels and a chair behind it here, right? And then you look around the base, and there's all these cows, these 12 oxen, these like stainless steel ones. These are the ones at Idaho Falls where I went as a kid for the first time. Big murals around the building, all depicting different time periods of baptism being restored to the earth, right? And then here's all these cows around this big hot tub, like this big baptismal font. Now, the belief is that every one of these cows or oxen is representative of each of the 12 tribes of Israel. So it's all this whole revisitation. The belief system is that this is going to go back and connect us to the 12 tribes of Israel. And this is connected to the deep belief in Mormonism that all of these temple rituals are connected directly to Solomon's temple, and that they draw their line of authority to do these rituals directly back to King Solomon. But Mormons don't know history, and they don't realize that King Solomon also wrote basically the handbook of satanic demonology and occult demonology. He wrote the Bible of demonology. He was doing occult black magic rituals and human sacrifices and had slaves. He was doing all sorts of ritualistic occult things that Mormons don't even know. They just want to trace it back to the Bible, and then they stop there. Like, okay, it came from original Old Testament Bible rituals, and so we'll just leave it at that and claim that it's true. They don't go back and look at how this kind of stuff was all a part of necromancy, a part of human sacrifice rituals, of all sorts of torture rituals. These go back to the ancient sacrifices to Baal, where they used to make a bronze bull or a brass brazen bull that had a dish or a cup on top of it that the bull was holding in its lap or on its back. And then they would take children up and give them up as offerings to Baal, to the gods. And all of this is sort of veiled in the occult Masonic nature of all this. And in another video, we can go into the historical background of what Joseph Smith did and the founders of the church, and especially Brigham Young, in building up a new American Freemasonry, and how these occult rituals are an essential part of that. So these oxen and this baptismal font really ultimately go back to ancient Greek and Minoan rituals that have to do with the Minotaur and the labyrinth and trying to get through the labyrinth of the maze, which has now been adapted into the beehive or the deseret. And you're supposed to, as an initiate, go through the initiation of going through the maze and avoiding the Minotaur, this bull, half man, half bull. And you go through the maze until ultimately you encounter Serapis at the end of the maze, which is this big Minoan Greek god that ultimately becomes like Jesus. But all of this stuff in Freemasonry gets passed along and handed up forward. And we could do a whole episode on that, on the ancient Minoan rituals and the beehives and the occult symbolism of Mormonism, and how all of that is baked in and Mormons don't even know it. But there's also a lot of videos and books about the occult history of Joseph Smith and the founders of the Mormon church and where all this stuff comes from. But remember now, I'm just a child. I'm like probably 10, 12 years old, getting taken in to this room with these oxen at night without my parents, going in here, and we're sitting in the back and I'm all dressed in white. I've just had this whole complex laid out to me. I'm not even sure if I should be there or if I'm worthy to be there or if I should leave. And now I'm getting ready to go in and do this necromancy. Now, when I say that word necromancy, what I mean is anytime you go in to do an occult ritual or some kind of a spiritual ritual, and the intention is that you are going to commune with dead spirits or try to contact dead spirits, communicate with them, or do things in their behalf, or they're supposed to go inside your body, or you're doing things for the spirit in the physical realm, that is necromancy, straight up. You are communing with dead spirits, trying to communicate with them, do work for them, have them do work for you, or letting them enter your body like a possession, where you do proxy or avatar like things for the dead spirits. And it doesn't matter who that spirit is, whether they were a good person or a bad person, you're doing this for everybody. Okay, everybody. So as this goes on, you're taken in to these crazy ritual rooms. And I'm going to show you, we're going to go back here to this channel, new name Noah. Please go check it out if you're into this stuff, if you want to see what it's really like, what the secret rituals are in the Mormon temples. Remember, I was taken in as a child to do this in that exact room that I just showed you in the picture. So this is the ritual. Children are taken up into the baptismal font, and then you get down into the hot tub, and these leaders then baptize you for and in behalf of other dead people. And they recite the prayer by saying it in such a way like, so you're going up the stairs here. There's the oxen you see at the bottom. So this is in the Salt Lake Temple. It looks like these are all golden bulls, golden oxen, and you see the big baptismal font up on their back. So this is all hidden camera footage, right? Going in here, there's the oxen. There's somebody in the back here dressed in white. Imagine being a little kid going through all of this, totally under the edge of accountability. So now the kid is getting in the water. So basically there's witnesses that are officiating. Okay. This is so wild. Okay, so there is the member of the church or the leadership who's in the water with you as an adult. And you're in there getting ready to get baptized for and in behalf of a dead spirit. So as a kid, you're in there doing this for them, and it is assumed that the dead spirit that you're doing this for, or dead spirits, multiple in a row, that they are all in attendance as well. And in the spirit prison, which is also layered and merged over where you are in the temple, they have the opportunity to be there, to go and be inside your body like a possession, and then you get baptized as a proxy for them, as an avatar for them. So this guy's going to dunk this kid in the water, and they're going to say that, like if it was for me, they would say, Carl Andresen, having been commissioned of Jesus Christ, I baptize you for and in behalf of, and then they would say Adolf Hitler, who they actually did baptisms for, who is dead. In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, amen. And then they go, boo, and they dunk you. And you have to go all the way under the water, completely submerged, and then come back out. It's very important. If your toe comes up or your finger comes up, or even part of your clothes comes up out of the water, you got to repeat it and do it again. And there's two witnesses sitting up there watching to make sure it's all said exactly right and done right. And if they say anything wrong, do anything wrong, even one word, one toe comes out of the water, you got to start over. The witnesses call a foul. It doesn't count. You got to do it again. So this is strict, right? Meanwhile, the officiator is sitting behind that little desk with his booklet, and he's checking the naming and the spelling, and he's also pushing that a little card up underneath a camera so that this guy can look at like a TV screen and read everything off of a script. So he's reading this like off of a script the whole time.
Sister Johnston, having been commissioned of Jesus Christ, I baptize you for and in behalf of Teresia Bartsit, who is dead, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen.
I was going to do it again.
Sister Johnston, having been commissioned of Jesus Christ, I baptize you for and in behalf of Anna Nemeth, who is dead, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen.
Over and over and over.
Sister Johnston, having been commissioned of
So you're just trying to get the water out of your nose. You're like, eyes are trying in the water. Pretty soon you just give up. You just get there with your eyes closed, keep your nose plugged, holding your breath. How many are we going to do?
Sister Johnston, having been commissioned of Jesus Christ, I baptize you.
And the kid who's supposed to go next is sitting back here waiting. So when this girl's done, they got to come up and they got to go next. And on and on and on. See, so now the next kid, this kid's done. Who knows how many, probably 15, 20. There was times when I would go in and we would do 50, 100 straight. So then one kid comes in, next one goes up. Okay, and they do this over and over. Here's a sample of some of the other rituals that we talked about. The standing around the altar rituals. These are the ceremonies and the rituals that the adults do before they go in. So when you get married and all that stuff, see, these are the rituals around the temple, the secret signs and the handshakes and all that. So this is all stuff that I've done as a child. So now I'm taken in there dressed in white and we do this and I'm baptized over and over and over. And then my friends over and over. And then when you're done, you go out all wrapped in a towel, you go soaking wet back into the locker room, take your wet clothes off and dry off, get dressed back into your church clothes. And then you go back into the waiting room area and wait for everybody to come out. It's like a whole other hour or two. And then the adults come out And then you sing another song, say another prayer, everybody gets on the bus, you go back to the church, and then your parents pick you up and you go home. If your parents or older brothers weren't the ones there. And this was all just part of the initial phase of my childhood, going in to get sealed to my parents and seeing all this and getting exposed to going through the Salt Lake Temple, seeing them dressed like that, doing the wedding ceremony stuff all around the altar, and then being taken in by these men in the community and the local Cub Scout leaders and Boy Scout leaders up to the temple at night to do these necromancy rituals. And the idea is that I'm in the water getting dunked, and whoever, Bob Thompson, so and so, or whatever, he's supposed to basically possess my body. I get baptized for him like an avatar as a proxy. And then he's supposed to come back and decide, or be in that moment, decide whether he's going to accept or deny that baptism. And then he either gets to go through the doorway to the next phase of the initiation to do more temple work. And then he gets to actually go through all the rituals and learn the handshakes as a avatar and as a proxy, as a spirit. And he gets to learn all the secret handshakes and go up to the Masonic veil and put his hands through and do that all as a dead spirit to try and get into heaven. And all of that is a part that is baked into my childhood, this complex. And meanwhile, these talks are being given about worthiness. I'm going in to talk to the bishop. He's like, so have you done anything wrong? What about touching yourself? What about reading books or seeing this? What about girls? What about this? What about that? Are you honest? Are you lying? It's like this whole worthiness, you know, quiz that you got to survive, that you got to get through to qualify for all this stuff. Meanwhile, he's one of the guys, and half of them in the room that are officiating are the ones showing me these VHS tapes, telling me what these adult topics even are and teaching them to me and defining them to me. They are the ones putting this stuff in my head. I was just a normal kid before all of this, just watching TV, listening to the radio, riding my bike, going to school, developing. And these church leaders are the ones suddenly putting me in this maze and in this funnel of worthiness, of self checking, of this world of spirits that come in and out of my body that talk to me, that are supposed to give me ideas and influence me for good or for bad. And I'm all doing this just as a child because I've been told at age 8 that I'm already accountable. And that by like age 12, I'm given the priesthood, the Aaronic priesthood, and told that I don't know how many people out there watching this were told this as well, but that you have more authority now than the Pope and more than the President of the United States at like 12 years old, because you're a member of the church and now you have some priesthood authority at 12. But remember, 8 years old is their age of consent and accountability in Mormonism because of the founders and their trying to start polygamy and all that. But that's all we're going to get into for this episode. I wanted to run down what it was like going to do my initial necromancy rituals as a youth and do these baptisms for the dead and these giant tanks of surrounded by cows and oxen, and the stories and the guilt complex and the whole dynamic of the Mormon church and the Boy Scouts program and these experiences with the leaders and the adults in the community that were in total contradiction to what was expected of me, and how all of these hypocrites were sitting there supposed to be the leaders and the examples to me as a child are turning around asking me if I'm worthy or what's wrong with me. And the paradox of my consciousness and the paradox within my soul, the paradoxes that unfold, that get baked into me, the whole way in which I perceive reality, my own feelings and thoughts in my head are now all skewed with this false spiritual realm and reality of these dead spirits constantly around me, talking to me, going and possessing me to do these occult rituals in the basement, just like Solomon's temple in the days of old, and the whole thing. And, I'm just a child being taken in by these hypocritical local adult leaders who don't even know what they're talking about, who most of them have probably honestly never even read the Bible all the way through. And now they're participating in these old occult seance like evil rituals that are emulating Minoan Greek robes and togas and all this stuff that comes from the old Roman Empire that has to do with these Freemason like rituals where you're in this maze escaping the Minotaur, and then you're trying to get to the Queen Bee, Heavenly Mother, through the veil of the hive of Deseret. And all the symbolism is baked in, but everybody's blind to it until you escape it, until you get out of the cult and look back and you see it historically within context for what it really is. None of that really occurs to you. So I'll put some links down in the description of this video so that you can go cross-reference what I'm talking about. You can go watch New Name Noah, go watch anything that I referred to when it comes to it, and I'll provide more historical context. I appreciate everybody being here to watch this video and to hear my story. I'm excited to continue for the rest of it and tell you what happened next as I prepared to come up through the church, and how I was basically trafficked around for free labor, ultimately as a missionary, how all of that went down, and what it was like going through the Mormon temple for the first time as an adult.